Hey everybody, welcome in once again to Strictly Speaking here on True Blue. I'm Bob Frantz. It is so good to have you. Today's guest is, well, he really needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. If you have seen one of the most popular video series, maybe in the history of the internet, called PragerU, well, today we're going to talk to the namesake, the guy who made this entire thing possible through a career of extraordinary commentary and work as an author and as a writer and as a pundit. Yeah, we're of course talking about Dennis Prager. If you don't know much about PragerU, which is part of a much larger Prager empire, but Prager University is a series of 5-minute videos, much of which are animated, to provide education and insight to young and more knowledgeable older people alike. We want to give you a small taste of it before we talk to Dennis Prager himself. Watch this.
In the first half of the 19th century, 4 million blacks worked as slaves imprisoned on plantations in the American South. The owners of these plantations were almost without exception Democrats. Before the Civil War, slave-owning Democrats used black bodies to massively increase the number of votes they got in Congress and the Electoral College.
When you hear the word transparency, what comes to mind? Chances are that you associate the word with a lot of good things like openness, honesty, accountability, and maybe even integrity. In a better world, those associations would be accurate. But in the world of the progressive left, transparency means something very different.
Almost everyone has heard of the doctrine of the separation of church and state. Most Americans believe that it's in the United States Constitution. But there is no such phrase in the Constitution, and there never was, for a simple reason. The Founding Fathers never intended for church and state to be completely separate.
The only way to become a good person, or to make a better society, is by studying goodness. Many people think all you need to do good or be good is to have good intentions. But you can no more be good without studying how to be good than you can play piano without studying how to play piano, or practice medicine without studying medicine.
As Columbus Day dies a slow, woke death, it might be a good idea to consider how this national holiday came about in the first place. The answer might surprise you. Ready for it? The purpose of Columbus Day was to encourage Americans to be more accepting of immigrants, specifically Italian immigrants.
During my first week at the University of Illinois, I was having lunch with some new friends. Suddenly, out of the blue, one of them said, "Hey, Xavier, did you just draw a smiley face on your application to get in here?" Puzzled, I asked, "What does that mean?" "You know, you're black and probably had decent grades. You could have just attached a smiley face and I'm sure you would have gotten in." I stared back at him, dumbfounded. Then I just got angry.
If I told you a story about a kid who grew up poor, product of divorce, did a lot of dumpster diving, sister ran away at age 14, welfare and food stamps, if I told you that kid was black, you'd go, well, yeah, that's because of systemic racism. But if I told you that kid was me, you'd go, what?
That is a small taste of what PragerU is all about. History, politics, culture, relationships, you name it, it is all there. And the namesake, again, is Dennis Prager. He really needs no introduction, but you should know that he is a nationally syndicated talk show host, heard across the country on nearly 400 stations, affiliates around the country, and their websites, which reach, of course, around the globe. He is the founder of PragerU. He is a Renaissance man. He is a best-selling author. His incredible series called The Rational Bible is read by people around the world, and we are fortunate enough to have him here, Strictly Speaking, today, right here on True Blue. So let's welcome the one of the giants in the conservative talk radio industry and its history, Dennis Prager. Dennis, my friend, it is good to see you. Thank you for taking the time. How are you?
Happy to accept your invitation.
Well, it is an honor to have you here, and I really appreciate you accepting that invitation. Dennis, I have been saying on my radio program for a very long time, long before I ever started interacting with you, and certainly before I was really honored to be able to guest host your radio show, that PragerU was the best thing on the internet. That's a very broad and strange term to say best thing, but there are video platforms, there are educational sites, there are entertainment vehicles. I mean, of all things, it is entertaining and it is instructional and enlightening for, like I said, young and old alike. It is such a phenomenal concept. Can we start there before we start talking about topics and issues? Give me the origin, the birth story of Prager University.
It was conceived, to use your verb of birth, it was conceived on the Indian Ocean. Alan Estrin, the producer of the show, my dear friend for, almost 40 years, 35 years. Alan Estrin came over to me on a Prager cruise. I've been doing these cruises for 30 years with listeners, literally all over the world, the Antarctic, the Baltic, West Africa, East Africa. And this was on the Indian Ocean. He comes over to me and he says, Dennis, we have to get your ideas to more people, which is the most important thing, basically, someone could say to me. I wrote in my diary in high school that I know what I want my life to be dedicated to. And these are the words I used in my diary in my junior year in high school: to influencing people to the good. And I know it's corny and all that, and it's self-referential. I don't care. That's all I care about is goodness. And that's why it was obvious in the video you played. So he comes over and said, we got to get your ideas to more people. Let's start Prager University. And if it was anyone else in the world, I would have thought they're joking. But Alan Estrin has not told a joke in the 35 years I know him. So he was not joking. And he thought of it, I think, for 5 minutes, would we build a university? And then we realized it was not conceivable monetarily, nor was it worth it. When you have the ability to touch people in the millions, and as we have in the hundreds of millions by the internet. And then he came up with this brilliant idea of 5-minute videos. And it is unbelievable how much information, if done well, and we do it really well, you can, in fact, impart in 5 minutes. The Bill Bennett, the famous Secretary of Education and drug czar in the Reagan administration, he was at my house years ago with his son. And his son said, Dennis, I just want you to know I learned more from Prager University than I did at Princeton. And I wasn't shocked. And of course, we don't teach STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, but we do teach everything else. And we now have a huge kids part where they wouldn't understand the 5-minute videos, in 5th grade, perhaps. So we have PragerU Kids, and that's been adopted by Florida and Oklahoma and a few other states, Arizona. So to make a long story short, that's what's happened. We according to Google Analytics, and Google hates us, so it has to be true, of our 1 billion views a year, 65% are under the age of 35.
That is phenomenal. Google hates you. Yeah, obviously. So do most of the online platforms. They hate PragerU as well. But I can't even imagine what the leftist teachers unions think about you in the states where PragerU has been adopted, as you just said, into the state curriculum.
Every single major medium, including, of course, the National Education Association, have attacked us. New York Times, Washington Post, NBC, CNN, you name it. And they all say the same thing. Oh, it's not an accredited university. We have on the front of our website, on the first page you enter, Prager University is not an accredited university. And by the way, I don't assume that if you're accredited, you're teaching anything worthwhile. So we're proud of the fact that we're not accredited.
Well, the fact that you had somebody say they learned more from this than Princeton's accredited, and what
Yeah,
does that tell you,
no
right?
kidding. That's right. That's correct.
You know what is people are going to say, and people do say, the critics and the ones who hate you and the Googles and everything else, like I just picked out that little montage that I played in the introduction last night. I sat down in front of my computer. I was preparing for today's interview with you, and I just grabbed a few clips of PragerU videos, and I mainly because I wanted to show some of the variety of celebrity voices and presenters you have there, like Candace Owens and Adam Carolla and Michael Knowles and some other people lesser known. But when you throw them up there in the way that I did, which was really rather random, though, it's anti-democrat, anti-progressive left. And so they're going to say you're trying to indoctrinate kids with conservatism in exactly the opposite way that we complain that they're indoctrinating kids with progressivism. How do you respond to that?
Anything that isn't left wing is considered conservative indoctrination. So that's the end of the issue. Either our videos are accurate and truthful, or they're not. But if your aim is truth, let alone the old tripod of education, truth, beauty, and goodness, if that is your aim, you are declared anti-left. And by the way, that is accurate. If you aim for truth, beauty, and goodness, you are not on the left. You can be a liberal, you can be a conservative, you can't be woke or progressive or left.
You are fanatical about pointing out the difference between liberal and being a person of the left.
Yes.
You do it on your program. People who listen know, but for those who don't know,
Right.
Explain that.
So there are two things to explain why I am adamant, because many people correctly note, what's the difference, Dennis? Liberals vote left. They're right. In terms of voting, there is no difference between liberal and left, which is an everlasting condemnation of liberals. They don't vote their values. Left vote their values. Conservatives vote their values. Liberals do not. If liberals voted their values, they would vote Republican. But they don't, because they were brainwashed from almost birth into believing, I know it, I went through it, that the right is a slippery slope to Nazism. That is what every liberal believes. They believe it as you believe that you and I are now talking. It is a certitude. So there is nothing the left can do that would have a liberal vote for the right. This is the tragedy of the country. If liberals voted liberal values, we conservatives protect liberal values like free speech. The left in its history, and that is my field of study. I was at the Russian Institute of Columbia. I know Russian. I went to communist countries regularly. There is no example of the left being in power in a country or in an institution and allowing free speech. They do not allow dissent. And there's a reason, because if you allow dissent, the left is ruined. That is why they fear our 5-minute videos. Why don't they just say, big deal, let kids watch 5 minutes of this nonsense? What do we care? But they do care, for the same reason they care if we go to their universities. They know in their heart that 90 minutes with an articulate conservative can undo 4 years of left-wing education. Now back to liberal and left. I have a list of, I think, 32 examples, and I have a video of 6 major examples at PragerU of differences between liberalism and leftism. Liberals are pro-capitalist. Leftists are anti-capitalist. Liberals are pro-Israel. Leftists are anti-Israel. Liberals do not believe that there are more than 2 sexes. The left believes that there are more than 2 sexes. I mean, basically take any left-wing position, and the odds are liberalism opposes it, like free speech. So why do I do it? I'm sorry, I meant to say this because I said I'd say 2 things. That's the ideological difference. Why do I think it's important? The only way we will get liberals to awaken is by constantly telling them how different their values are from left-wing values, and we have to get the liberal on our side.
Well, from what you just described, one would say that a liberal and a conservative are synonymous because the values are the same. So why?
There's one big difference. The one big difference, the one area where left and liberal agree is expanding the government, which is huge because the whole American experiment is on small government. So one has, as I said, truth, beauty, and goodness. That is the truth.
So to the point about voting, leftists vote their values, which are communistic almost. Conservatives vote their values, but liberals do not vote their values because they vote with the left. Why? What stops them from voting their values? Why are they so hooked? Or you said brainwashed at the beginning. How are they brainwashed into voting with the leftists rather than the people who should?
Because they're not voting for the left in their mind. They're voting against the right. And they do believe that the right inevitably ends up with Nazis. That's it. It's an idiotic belief. There is no truth to it, but it doesn't matter. That's what they believe. And you've got to approach people where they are. And that's where they are. And it is the tragedy of America that liberals vote left.
And the Nazis, for those who don't know, there was the National Socialist Party. Socialism, of course, is more akin to communism than it is to capitalism. So how on earth did that distinction get made?
Right.
That mistake.
Bob, I don't think there are 10 students at Harvard who know what Nazi stands for.
That's pretty sad.
Oh, it's tragic. So here is what does National Socialism means? What's the difference between Stalin and Hitler ideologically? Stalin did not believe in national socialism. He believed in class socialism. Hitler believed in socialism just as much as Stalin did. However, he believed that it be rooted in national identity, in his case, racial identity. So it should be racial socialism, but it's called National Socialism. And I don't call Nazism either right or left. It's sui generis. Nazism was its primary belief was racist, and its primary aim was to extinguish all Jews from the face of the earth, just as it is of us.
So finish the masterclass on ideology here then and take us to fascism, because that's the other word that is used. It's why Antifa exists. They call themselves anti-fascist, which of course is anti-right wing, anti-alt-right, anything, you say that liberals say that they oppose, conservatism because it leads to Nazism, but it also leads to fascism in their minds. Explain that.
So they throw the term fascist around like almost as much as they do neo-Nazi or Nazi or racist. So fascist, in particular, fascist is not, again, the use of the words right and left. So what is Stalin? How does Stalin different from a fascist? What Stalin did, and they have done it ever since. Again, and most people don't know this, but this is my field of study. So Trotsky and Lenin really created Russian communism. And during the Civil War, after the Russian Revolution in 1917, he was the head of the Red Army. He was instrumental to communism arising in Russia. He fell out with Stalin, and he fled Russia. He went to Mexico. And Stalin declared Trotsky, the founder with Lenin of communism in Russia, a fascist. What the left did, starting with Stalin in the 1920s, what it has done is state all those who oppose us are fascists. And it works.
So we allowed one of the founders of communism to essentially create that version of another ideology, and branded Trotsky as a fascist, and anyone who opposed communism as a fascist.
That's correct. That's the
Wow.
way it works. You oppose the left, you're a fascist, you're a neo-Nazi, you're a racist, and of course, six herbs: sexist, intolerant, xenophobic, homophobic, Islamophobic, racist, bigoted.
So
I
in
coined that term 30 years ago.
in 5 minutes, you just gave us like I said, a little masterclass in it. Is there a 5-minute video on PragerU explaining Nazism and the fact that, like you said, Harvard students don't know what National Socialism is? Do
Well,
we
we have 600 5-minute videos up. Everyone should see them at least twice, and if they read the accompanying books and articles, they don't have to go to college. So 1 out of 10 videos, so about 60 of the 600 are videos I have made. One of them is, why don't people hate communism as much as they hate Nazism? It's one of the videos that would explain what you just asked.
Can you give us a thumbnail sketch of a
Yeah,
5-minute
well,
video?
yes, in part, there are many reasons. First, there's total ignorance enforced by the left wing that teaches at universities. Almost nobody knows the atrocities of the left. They know about the Holocaust, though increasingly students don't even know that. But they know the Holocaust. They don't know Gulag. In the Gulag, Stalin murdered between 20 and 40 million people. I mean, these are numbers that, as Stalin said, one death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic. So people just don't know about what the communists did. The greatest murderer by numbers in history is Mao, about 60 million Chinese. And remember, for every one of the 60 million that he killed, think of the ripple effect, the loved ones who were devastated. I mean, this, you can almost not imagine the levels of horror that the communists have achieved. So that's one reason. People just don't know what communism did. So there are still restaurants named after Che Guevara. And really interesting, to show you how true this is, to this day, Mao's posters, the poster of Mao, is still around China. In fact, it's in their great hall where their parliament, their rubber stamp parliament meets, is a gigantic mural of Mao Zedong. It would be like Germany meeting in the Bundestag, their parliament, with a gigantic poster of Hitler. I mean, if the thought that China celebrates the man who slaughtered 60 million Chinese, we're talking, this is beyond anything Orwell could imagine. So that's one, the ignorance. Number two, the left writes the history. So that they don't write a history of what communism did. They write a history of what the Nazis did. So every moral person is to be anti-Nazi, not anti-communist, because again, they write the history, and that history is just not known. Number three, communism emanates from, often, not always at all, Mao was a sadist, but for many people, communism emanates from the desire to do good. Nazism emanates from the desire to do bad. So since people now judge movements and ideologies by intentions, because we live in the age of feelings, therefore communism, well, they may have made a mistake. Mao may have made mistakes, and Stalin made mistakes, and Pol Pot made mistakes, Castro made mistakes, but in theory, it's beautiful. Whereas nobody thinks in theory Nazism is beautiful, except for Hamas, because they agree with the Nazis about exterminating Jews. So those are the three reasons. By the way, the third is so important because good intentions are worthless. People must understand that. Good intentions are worthless in terms of ideology. And by the way, I think they're worthless in general. People say when they get a crappy gift, oh, it's the thought that counts. Well, between a crappy gift and a really great gift, everybody knows the gift counts.
Yeah. And you did a whole, that was the very beginning of one of your own 5-minute videos talking about goodness, and you cannot be good through good intentions. You have to practice doing good.
Yeah.
And that's well said. I'm trying to figure out how it got to the way that it did, other than what you just said about good intentions, that communism's general goal is good, is positivity for all peoples and so forth.
Oh, yeah. I think their goals stink, but people think that their goals are noble.
Right. Understood. I get that. Yeah. I understand what you're saying, but I'm blown away. Most people think Hitler killed 6 million people. 6 million Jews. Reality is he killed probably more like 12 million people, because he didn't just kill Jews, but
Right.
Jews were the primary focus, obviously, of this, the final solution to the Jewish question. But you just said it. Stalin killed 20 million. Mao killed 60 million. Just by simple, staggering math, one would think that they would be the most historically reviled figures rather than Hitler, but it's not. And American educational institutions, the one that I went to, I learned all about the Holocaust. I learned all about Hitler. I didn't learn about Stalin. I didn't learn much about Mao. A little bit, but not a lot. When I got to college, I got a little bit about, the Chinese, revolution. But why, Dennis, have American educational institutions from K on up decided that they're going to talk about the Holocaust and the Hitler issue, but not the communist issue?
Well, as I said, the left writes the history books and the left teaches your children. They're not going to have a course in your local public school on communism as the greatest destroyer of life in human history.
Or socialism, for that matter. Socialism has killed 100 million people.
Sorry?
Socialism has killed 100
yeah,
million.
well, 100 million is the communist figure. So the question is, do you distinguish between communism and socialism? And fine, there is a theoretical difference. That's fine. But even Stalin would have said, we have not yet reached communism. We're still in the stage of socialism. So they don't claim this big distinction between socialism and communism. But if you want to make that claim, fine. But socialism doesn't work. Socialism spends the money that capitalism has produced. But
those are some of the noble intentions too, right? The socialists had noble intentions. They want to redistribute wealth.
Yes, redistribute. Everybody wants to be Robin Hood. Exactly.
Right. Until the money runs out, until somebody else's money.
We have run out of money. The financial catastrophe will come. It breaks my heart for my children and grandchildren. It breaks my heart for me. It may happen in my lifetime. You can't have, what is it, $34 trillion in debt and survive as an economically viable institution. No. I worry that the dollar will be dropped as the world currency. Then they'll all want their investments in America paid back. We don't have the money to do so. We'll just print it. And you will end up with the Weimar Republic. Hitler didn't come to power primarily on the basis of anti-Semitism. And I've written a well-regarded book on anti-Semitism. I know a lot about this. He came to power because of the economic crisis in the Weimar Republic. That people would buy bread with a wheelbarrow of cash. Literally wheelbarrows. They would wheel, I think they were called Reichsmarks, to a store and get one loaf of bread for what they've wheeled in. Right now, what is it? My stepson, who's autistic and is in his 30s and lives with my wife and me. So we often get him his favorite fast food meal. So I know their prices. If you go to Taco Bell, you're going to spend a minimum of $15. That's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
For $2 worth of food.
Yeah.
Literally for the ingredients of $2 worth of food. No, that is what's happened. Finish your thought on that.
Well, there at some point, the chickens are going to come home to roost. You can't print your way out of financial irresponsibility. The left does that, and often, by the way, the Republicans have gone along.
Yes, they have.
Yeah, yes. I mean, again, truth, beauty, and goodness got to be devoted to all of them.
16 years ago in 2008, I think when Barack Obama came in, I think the national debt was around $10 trillion. 16 years later, it's at 34. And because of the amount of the principal, the interest, I mean, it'll be 50 million, by before another decade is out. And I don't know what that means. I don't know how we deal with that or how that impacts our lives. I wonder if you don't just wave it off.
Well, I mean, just think of the amount of money in waiving college debt loans. I mean, everything is done by the left to stay in power or attain power. And in a democracy, if you promise people goodies, you get elected. That is why, was it Franklin who said this is it's a republic, ma'am, if you can keep it. And
Mm-hmm.
the founders said, this is made for a moral and religious people. It won't work for anyone else. And I have said for decades, I believe, and I don't speak with hyperbole. I may be wrong, but this is not hyperbolic. I believe it is harder to get off free things than it is to get off heroin.
What are those three things?
Free things, F-R-E.
Free things. Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, I'm glad you.
Yeah, well, and that makes sense. Sure, because you get used to it and it becomes an addiction. I get that too.
It's an addiction, yes.
Yeah. You talk about a moral people and a religious people will benefit and be able to keep a republic from what Franklin said. And I think that's true. And because of that, we're going to talk about the Rational Bible here in a moment. But I want to look forward for a moment. You said that the left gets to write the history books. And so therefore, that's how our next generations, they decide what is learned by them. When the left writes the history books about this age right now, this era, this 21st century, from 2000 until where we are right now, what does that history look like? What will those books?
That America did so well under Barack Obama. A neo-fascist or real fascist came to power on some fluke in 2016, and then they decided after the 2020 election to undo the democratic process of the peaceful transfer of power through an insurrection. I mean, they're writing it right now. This is what most Americans believe. January 6th was an insurrection. The only insurrection with animal horns on a guy's hat and no weapons. I mean, by the way, there wasn't one January 6th defendant that was indicted on insurrection. So it's a lie that it was an insurrection. It's a lie like the Russian collusion was a lie. It was a lie like lockdowns were good for society was a lie. But it's all built on a lie.
What will these leftists who are going to write these history books say about the culture, not just the politics, not just the 2016 and everything you just described, but what we're watching right now, the change in science, literally trying to erase what we all know of biological and anatomical science, what they're doing to children, everything that we're seeing right now that is literally upside down from what we knew growing up. When 2050 comes around, 2075 comes around, and you and I are long gone, how do they define this time?
Their way of putting it, as you know, right before being on with you, I was on Piers Morgan, and my opponent was a big man of the left, and I raised this issue of more than two sexes, that the left believes that, and he said, of course there are at least seven, and unlike you, that is you conservatives or you, Dennis, unlike you, we believe that children should be free to say who they are. Their view of hormone blockers for children, of double mastectomies for teenage girls or 20-year-old girls for that matter, they believe that these are noble intentions. So that's why I wrote a recent column of mine, is that the left-right divide is unbridgeable. The North and South were divided by slavery, which is obviously a big enough issue to have massive number of Americans die to end it. However, that was the issue. It was a racist belief in inferiority of blacks, quite a sick belief, but that was it. Beyond that, North and South celebrated almost the same values. I mean, that's a big one not to celebrate, but the human being is complex. They're compartmentalized. And but now we have nothing in common. Nothing. And if you think it's fair for a man who says he's a woman to compete against women in sports, to be placed in a women's shelter, most of whose women were beaten or raped by a man, and now they're with an anatomical man next to them who says he's a woman. I mean, if you believe that, what possible dialogue is possible?
Well, you're not wrong, obviously. I agree with everything you just said, but it's really, really hard to hear and to crystallize it like that because, as you said, the Civil War, the North and the South, it was over slavery, and eventually they were able to come to an understanding that, yeah, this was insane about the inequality and so forth and the subhuman, and they came together, and we worked very, very hard, spent an awful lot of money, lost an awful lot of blood and people to remedy that. But what you're saying now is there is no remedy. There's no coming together to figure it all out based on the way the left and the right is now compared to what the North and the South were then.
The only remedy is for them to hear us. That is why they do everything possible to suppress us. Big tech, elementary schools, high schools, colleges. Why do they go nuts over PragerU? As I said earlier, they should say, so watch the damn 5-minute videos. We have the kids the rest of the time. If they got to hear us, read us, and study under us, like we hear them, watch them, and study under them, we would prevail. But they don't allow it. That's the whole point.
Because they know that. That's exactly right.
They know it, but they couch it in the terms of misinformation. That so they can justify not allowing us to be heard, read, or studied under by saying we give misinformation. And who's for misinformation? So that's the way they do it. They know that we would prevail, but they justify it, which shows how weak the human conscience is. They mollify their conscience by stating we're just stopping misinformation.
Yeah, that is exactly how they do it, and they know they cannot compete in the playing field of ideas, and so they have to censor ours. I get that too. To your point about morality, you did a complete 180 on Donald Trump. You and I shared a stage in Cleveland, Ohio in the primary season leading into the 2016 election. And Michael Medved was there, and Hugh Hewitt was there, and a number of others. And you were adamant that you could not support Donald Trump. So was Medved and some others. Now, Medved stuck to that. You did a 180, and now you're talking about what they did to him with the declaring an insurrection and all of the rest. Can you explain to people who maybe still don't get Trump and don't like Trump how a guy who is a moralistic, guy who teaches the Bible and writes the rational Bible, how you did the 180 on a guy that doesn't have the morals that that you require?
Yeah, I can, and I can explain it really clearly. Number one, just on a personal note, I wrote in National Review in 2015 or 16. So it's there. The internet has a long memory. I wrote against him, why I was against him. But I wrote, if he is the nominee, I will support him. So the 180 was predicted. I didn't do a 180 because he became a wonderful human being. I did a 180 because virtually any Republican is infinitely superior to virtually any Democrat. The Democratic Party is destroying America. Therefore, the opposition to the Democratic Party is almost definitionally good, since good is relative in that sense. Now, secondly, once I did support him, I wrote over and over, including a debate with Bret Stephens on the New York Times Facebook page. I wrote and I said, I don't vote based on the goodness, niceness, or any other aspect of the personal life of a candidate. I choose, if I had cancer, I would choose my surgeon based on his or her record of curing cancer, not based on whether the oncologist surgeon was faithful to his wife or to her husband. I wrote 30 years ago. It's in my book published in 1998, Think a Second Time. It's 44 essays. One of the essays is Adultery and Politicians. It is none of my damn business whether a public figure committed adultery. It's his wife's business, his children's business, maybe his friend's business, and God's business. But it isn't my business. That I'm not voting for pastor. I'm voting for president. And he turned out to be a great president, not a good one, a great one. And by the way, for the religious people who oppose him, they should reject the Bible. God chose King David. King David not only committed adultery, King David had the husband of the woman he slept with killed, sent him out to battle knowing he would die there. I mean, that's really, 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 really bad. And God chose in the same Bible for a prostitute to be the heroine of the Israelite conquering of Canaan. The Israelite spies were put up by a prostitute. Why did God choose a prostitute? He could have chosen an accountant or a poet. Maybe it's to teach us a lesson. Our task is not to figure out the moral sins of leaders. Our task is to produce a good society and to get a job done. And he got the job done. End of issue. The moral onus is on conservatives who were and still remain never Trumpers. They need to explain themselves, and they can't. Their explanations are childish. I don't like Trump. Therefore, I will allow the left to continue to destroy my country. That is pure, undiluted narcissism. It says how I feel is more important than my country.
So having said all of that accurately, as per usual, will they allow him? I mean, you talk about how they feel about Hitler compared to Stalin, compared to Mao. They speak of Trump in Hitlerian terms. That's how they feel about him. That's how much animus there is against him. They, in my opinion, took an election from him in 2020 for that very same reason. Do you think there's any way they allow him to come back this November?
I don't have an answer. My hope is Hugh Hewitt wrote a book about 20 years ago. It was prophetic. If it isn't close, they can't cheat. So our task is to have such an overwhelming vote for Trump that even if they cheat, they can't win.
And can there be such an overwhelming vote with some of the conservative Republicans who are in the Never Trump camp still there?
It's possible, oddly enough, because there are constituencies that always voted Democrat that are shifting, and that blacks and Hispanics, for example. So it's
going to be a very, very close thing.
Well,
it's problematic because if Hugh is right, closeness equals cheating. So,
well, that is yes, it's very problematic. First of all, I mean, it should be obvious to anyone who cares about truth. They have basically destroyed election day. It's now election month. They send out tens of millions of ballots to people who didn't request them. They oppose voter ID. They have gone from paper ballots to computerized ballots, which makes cheating infinitely easier. You can't cheat with paper ballots like you can cheat with machines. I'm not saying the machines cheated. I'm just saying it's infinitely easier to do so. Why did they do that? Did they know election results in 1952 on the night of the election, but in 2020 it took days and sometimes weeks? Why?
Well, they might argue because there were hanging chads in 2000. That's why paper was
Yes,
fallible.
fine, and that's the way they were able to resolve the hanging chads. They looked at every chad. That's exactly right.
Right. And then had to determine intent if it was a pregnant chad, if it had been punctured, but it didn't come all the way through,
Right.
and all the rest of the nonsense. But they are exploiting that now, and I agree with you with the computers. Dennis, you saw it, I'm sure. 2 months ago, there was a hearing on this, and in a court of law in front of a judge, a computer hacker showed how he can change an actual active live Dominion voting machine, change a vote from a yes to a no, and I don't remember what the issue was. It doesn't matter, but showed that he could do it with a pen, borrowed a pen from somebody in the court, and not like a special tool. Just watch this, bing bang boom, and the computer vote had been changed. They did this in a court of law, and
Yeah,
yet
well.
still
So
secretaries of state use it.
again, I'd like to know from the so-called independent voter. Okay, I assume some exist. So
Yeah, they
I'd like
do.
to ask them, name me one benefit that electronic voting has conferred on the voting process.
Yeah, you can't say speed of results because it's
That's
taking
right.
longer than ever.
Oh, you can't say honesty of results because it's much easier to count ballots that are physical than malleable on a machine.
Dennis, I haven't talked anywhere near enough about your radio career, but I want to get to your career as an author. Is it fair to say you've been doing radio for over 40 years? You've been writing for decades as well. The Rational Bible series, and you can see it's an audiobook or it's in hardbound book, but is this your life's work? Is this the most important thing you do?
Right now, PragerU and that and the radio. I think the radio is very important. I think they're sort of tied right
Okay.
now. In the long run, I believe that the Bible commentary will be the most important thing I did, and I'll explain why. The Bible commentary is a volume of commentary on each of the first 5 books of the Bible, known as the Torah. Jews regard the whole Bible as holy, or the whole Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, but the Torah has always been regarded as essentially the Word of God. It's primus inter pares. It is first among equals. I think Jesus would have said the same thing. So this commentary is on what I believe is the antidote to evil. The first 5 books. If you know those 5 books, if you understand them, you will gain the only antidote to evil that exists, and that's wisdom. There is no secular institution that has wisdom. There are some secular people with wisdom, overwhelmingly because they grew up in a Judeo-Christian universe. But with regard to the secular institutions, the schools, the universities, that is more important than any other thing. You can't do good without wisdom, and we don't teach wisdom. So I have been teaching these 5 books from the Hebrew all of my life. I am in love with those 5 books. As I often tell people, I don't believe in the Torah because I believe in God. I believe in God because I believe in the Torah. This is written for people of every faith and no faith. For your interest, the reader I have in mind when I write this is a peasant in China who never heard of the Bible. I want to make it so clear that someone with no background will understand. And I explain virtually every verse. I mean, so-and-so begat so-and-so. I don't usually have a commentary, but otherwise I do. I mean, there are thousands of words on the Ten Commandments, which I consider the document. Or let me put it this way. I say to audiences all the time, you really want to defund the police? There is a way. Just have everybody live by the Ten Commandments. That is the solution to evil. Those Ten Commandments. And they're in 2 of the 5 books, in Exodus and in Deuteronomy. So there are 5,000 reviews of these books on Amazon, mostly overwhelmingly non-Jews, overwhelmingly among the non-Jews Christians. And many of them write, I grew up, I went to Catholic school, or I went to Christian school, but I never understood these books until I read this commentary. And so, yeah, I'm banking on the belief that people will read it when I have left this world.
Why did you feel like the Bible wasn't clear enough for people just to read the Torah, read the Bible? They need to read your explanation of it, or your translation of it, or your commentary of it.
It's an excellent question. I have never written a word that I thought duplicated what was already done. So I'll give you an example. I think you'll get a kick out of this. At the age of 25, I told my dear friend, Joseph Telushkin, who became one of the most prolific Jewish writers on Judaism living. And I said to him, we need to write an introduction to Judaism. The other introductions, they don't answer the questions people are really asking. And so we decided to call it 8 Questions People Ask About Judaism. And it became the 9 Questions when Simon & Schuster published it. We published it first on our own. And, excuse me. So he went to his mother. He mentioned to his mother, he's very close to his parents. And he said, Mom, Dennis and I are thinking of writing an introduction to Judaism. And she asked basically in her way what you just asked me. She said, Joseph, you know how many introductions there are to Judaism? You and Dennis are 25 years old. You're going to write something better? And Joseph came back to me asking me that question. Dennis, we're going to write something better? And I said, yeah, that's exactly what we're going to do. That book became the most widely read English introduction to Judaism in print. It's been in print for 50 years.
And you did that at 25.
At 25, yes, exactly.
Did you feel divinely inspired, Dennis? I mean, did you just feel like this is something you were called, or was it just an aspirational, I want to do something big? I mean, I kind of feel like you had to have been touched.
I felt that I wanted to do it for God. I didn't feel that God had told me to do it.
Okay.
But I want to explain why. And this is a different rhetoric than Christians often speak of. God has, you should do what God calls you to do, and so on, which I deeply respect. I'm the biggest non-Christian defender of Christians probably in the public sphere. And but it's not my language. The reason, though, is not because I don't believe God calls people to do something. It's that it's like this. If I were in a plane crash and everybody or nearly everybody got killed and I survived, I don't think I would say God chose me to survive, because I can't believe I'm more worthy than the people who got killed in that plane crash. So I'm very, very, very hesitant about ever saying God did X or Y in my life. That's the only reason. But I absolutely feel I'm doing his work. That's there's no question. I think that when we meet, and I hope it isn't immediate, but I hope that when we meet, he'll say he'll say what my traitor says on the rare occasion that that she praises me, because I told her 7 years ago, I don't want any trainer talk. Great job. Awesome. I can't stand that stuff. But one time she said, not too shabby. And I said, that's a big compliment.
That's perfect. But you do believe God touches and talks to some and tells them. I mean,
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
think burning bush right out of the, top
Oh,
of my head.
the biblical characters to whom God appeared, I've verbally at least, I have no doubt about that. That's a given. But I'm not Moses.
You didn't feel like you yourself, you wanted to do this for God rather than God telling you what he wanted you to do.
That's the way I put it. Yes.
That's so you said a few minutes ago, the Rational Bible was written for people of all faiths. You said you're targeting Chinese and no faith, like a Chinese peasant
Right.
who had never even heard of the Bible. But let's talk about the other faiths. A Muslim who has heard of the Quran. How does the Rational Bible pull somebody from that faith? A Hindu, a practitioner, or
Well, all I need from anyone, Hindu or atheist, all I need is that they read it. I do believe that reason, I call it the Rational Bible for a reason. Reason is my road to God. Not mysticism, not theology. My road to God is reason, which is God's gift to humans. Animals don't have it. And I use that gift because there's nothing in any of the volumes that I've written that asks you to take something on faith. Therefore, anyone can read it and benefit. They can even stay their religion. But my hope is that if they share with me a commitment to the rational process, it will deeply move them. I spoke to a group of Czech students or young people. They weren't students. They're in their 20s in the Czech Republic in 2021. And a guy comes over to me and in front of the group said, I just want you to know Ben Shapiro brought me to conservatism and you brought me to God. And I was very moved. And I did say to him, I'm really moved. I just want you to remember, when you tell anybody that, it was two Jews who did that.
That's beautiful. That's perfect. Well, you've talked often about you've probably brought more Christians to God than evangelical preachers and pastors have. Because even though you're a Jew, what your belief is and what your method is and your reason, as you say, the way you teach about the first 5 books of the Bible, I mean, that is literally universal. And those who are Christians are just as influenced by that as anything in the New Testament.
Well, exactly. What did Jesus cite the most? Psalms and Deuteronomy.
And
when he said, "Love God," the great commandments of love God and love your neighbor, he got that. Love your neighbor is from Leviticus, and love God is from Deuteronomy.
Well, what I love is the fact that you do this through a method that people should be enticed to explore, because you said you get there through reason, not through faith. Faith is a belief in something for which we have no evidence. And you're saying, just trust me on this one. You have to believe. You're saying, sure, but I'm going to explain it point by point by point. Reason is going to take us to a way to get there. And that should pull more people, I would imagine, in than anything else anybody could write as a precursor to Judaism or to the Bible itself.
That's my belief, and I've been proven correct.
The Rational Bible. Well, Dennis, I want to say thank you. We're up on our hour. I want to send as many people as humanly possible to the did you say 600 5-minute videos?
Yes.
So 600 5-minute videos.
My fireside chat. They'll love my fireside chat every week. There are 350 of them up.
Well, you know what? We have a montage of your fireside chat that I might have to play after we part ways here, just to put it up there for people, because it is
Good.
wonderful. You channel your FDR and you do the fireside chats. We've got PragerU, the Rational Bible, and of course the Dennis Prager radio program. 400 affiliates around the country. Find all of it at DennisPrager.com. Dennis, thank you for being such a phenomenal role model in the radio industry. This is where I have come to be such an admirer of yours, but thank you for everything you're doing for everybody with respect to faith, culture, and beyond. Thank you so much for doing it.
The sentiments are entirely mutual.
It's very, very kind of you to say. Phenomenal conversation. That is what a deeper dive is supposed to sound like. By the way, let's make good on our promise before we wrap. Dennis's fireside chats are incredible. It's as down to earth and human and real, deep feelings about so many different topics here. You kind of have to see it to believe. We put together a very brief little montage of some of Dennis's topics on fireside chats. Watch this.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Fireside Chat. My chance to give you some thoughts about life and take questions from you wherever you happen to be watching. Let me just reflect on that for a moment, because this is a very long-standing theme in my life. How people are affected by media. Well, you know, Palestinian children are as precious as Israeli children. The CDC, on its website, you can obviously look this up, it now doesn't say pregnant women, it says pregnant people. My love for the United States of America has always been very deep. So to say that in some ways, many ways, I felt more comfortable in Europe, that's the great lesson that people need to learn. If you want joy, you must be prepared for pain. It's not rational to say, my parents got divorced, I'm afraid of getting married. Suicide in the United States, it is at the highest rate ever recorded since as they put it, the dawn of World War II. You will probably be the ones to save the West. You in the East. It just happened again, another shooting, a mass shooting in the United States. Something you won't expect. The lyrics to a Taylor Swift song.
All right, just another reason to find your way to DennisPrager.com, fireside chats, among all of the other things. Hey, thanks for watching Strictly Speaking. We certainly appreciate it. If you like what you saw, share it with other people, particularly if you know other people who would be influenced by Dennis Prager, but we certainly would love for you to do that as well. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.